When David Harrington walked into the mall with his son, he expected nothing more than a quiet afternoon buying sneakers. But when he paid with a $100 bill, suspicion sparked. A cashier whispered. Security circled. Then the officers arrived. They slammed him to the floor, cuffed him in front of his 10-year-old boy, and mocked him as cameras recorded. The crowd saw another black man accused of fake cash. The officers thought they had easy prey, a powerless target. But David Harrington wasn't ordinary. He was the director of Homeland Security, and they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. David Harrington guided his black Mercedes into the mall parking lot, stealing a glance at Malik in the rearview mirror. His son's face glowed with excitement, those deep brown eyes sparkling just like his mother's used to. The memory of Sarah brought a familiar ache, but David pushed it aside, focusing on the joy of their Saturday morning together. "Remember what we agreed on, buddy?" David asked, pulling into a spot near the main entrance. "Yeah, Dad. No begging for the super expensive ones." Malik's grin was infectious. "But can I at least try them on?" David chuckled, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Of course you can try them on. That's how we make sure they fit right." He stepped out of the car, his tall frame unfolding with the natural grace of someone used to commanding respect. His casual weekend attire, a gray sweatshirt and jeans, was a welcome change from his usual suit and tie. "Racy to the door," Malik called out, already sprinting across the parking lot. "Hey, wait up!" David lengthened his stride to catch up, but deliberately stayed a step behind. These moments were precious, just being a dad, no thoughts of national security briefings or threat assessments. Inside the mall, the Saturday morning crowd was starting to build. The air conditioning hummed, mixing with the buzz of conversation and the faint music from overhead speakers. They passed a pretzel stand, and David caught Malik eyeing it hopefully. "Maybe after we get the shoes," David said, placing a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Let's focus on the mission at hand." "Just like one of your operations, right, Dad?" "Something like that." David smiled, remembering how Malik loved hearing sanitized versions of his field training stories. Except this time, the target is the perfect pair of sneakers. They made their way to Athletic World, where rows of shoes lined the walls in a rainbow of colors and styles. Malik's eyes went wide, taking it all in. David watched his son's excitement with a mixture of love and nostalgia. He remembered being Malik's age when new shoes were a rare luxury his own parents could barely afford. "See anything you like?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. Malik had been talking about the new Air Maxes for weeks. "Can I look at those blue ones?" Malik pointed to a display in the corner. A young sales associate approached them. "Need any help today?" "Yes. Could we see these in a size 7? David asked, indicating the shoes Malik had chosen. While they waited, David sat on one of the low benches watching Malik examine every detail of the display models. His son was growing so fast, it seemed like yesterday he was learning to walk. Since Sarah's passing 3 years ago, David had thrown himself into being both mother and father, determined that Malik would never feel the absence of either parent's love. The sales associate returned with the shoes, and Malik tried them on, walking back and forth with exaggerated care. "How did they feel, buddy?" David asked, checking the fit with his thumb. "They're perfect!" Malik bounced on his toes. "And they make me run faster, I can tell." David laughed. "Is that so? Well, we better get them then. Can't have you slowing down on me." They made their way to the register where a thin white woman with pinched features stood examining her nails. She straightened up as they approached, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Find everything okay?" she asked, her tone professionally distant. "Yes, thank you." David pulled out his wallet and extracted a crisp $100 bill. He'd just gotten it from the bank yesterday, along with several others for various weekend expenses. The cashier took the bill between her thumb and forefinger, as if it might bite her. She held it up to the light, turning it this way and that, her lips pressed into a thin line. David felt a familiar tension creep into his shoulders. He'd seen that look before, the automatic suspicion, the unspoken accusation. Beside him, Malik shifted uncomfortably, picking up on the sudden change in atmosphere. The cashier's eyes flicked between David and the bill. Without a word, she reached under the counter and pressed something. A silent alarm, David realized, his security training kicking in. His heart sank as he saw two uniformed mall security guards changing direction, heading straight for their register. "Is there a problem?" David asked, keeping his voice steady for Malik's sake. But he already knew what was coming. He'd seen it too many times before. The assumption that a black man with $100 bill must be up to something. Malik pressed closer to his side. "Dad," he whispered, confusion and worry mixing in his voice. "It's okay, son," David said softly, though he could feel his pulse quickening. He placed a protective hand on Malik's shoulder, watching the guards draw nearer. The cashier still hadn't answered his question, just stood there with that tight, suspicious look on her face. Other customers were starting to stare now. A teenage girl pulled out her phone, already recording. David felt Malik trembling slightly under his hand, and a deep anger began to burn in his chest. Not for himself, but for his son having to witness this moment, this casual degradation that no 10-year-old should ever have to understand. The glass doors of Athletic World burst open as two police officers strode into the store. The taller one, Sergeant Harland Briggs, led the way with his hand already on his holster. Behind him, Officer McVeigh's face was a careful blank, his body language tense and ready. "What seems to be the problem here?" Harlan's voice boomed through the store, making other customers jump. His eyes locked onto David immediately, ignoring the security guards who had barely opened their mouths. "There's been a misunderstanding about—" "Shut it." Harlan snapped, closing the distance between them in 3 steps. "We got a report of counterfeit bills being passed. Let me see that 100. The cashier wordlessly handed over the bill. Harlan barely glanced at it before shoving it into his pocket. "Yeah, that's fake, all right." "Officer, if you just verify—" David started again, his voice measured despite the anger building in his chest. "Daddy." Malik Cedars dug into David's hand, his voice trembling. "I said shut it." Harlan's face reddened. "McVeigh, get the kid out of the way." Officer McVeigh stepped forward, reaching for Malik. David instinctively pulled his son closer, but Harlan was already moving. The sergeant's hand shot out, shoving David backward. Malik's grip was torn away as McVeigh roughly pushed him aside. "Don't touch my son." David's composed facade cracked, parental instinct overriding his professional training. "Oh, now you're resisting." Harlan's smile was ugly. He grabbed David's arm, twisting it behind his back with unnecessary force. "Hands behind your back, big shot." The cold metal of handcuffs bit into David's wrist. Before he could steady himself, Harlan kicked the back of his knees. David's legs buckled and he crashed to the floor. The impact drove the air from his lungs as Harlan pressed a knee into his back, grinding his face against the cold tile. "Dad, stop hurting my dad." Malik's screams echoed through the store. David tried to turn his head, desperate to see his son, but Harlan's hand pressed harder against his skull. "Teaching your kid the family business, huh?" Harlan sneered, his breath hot against David's ear. "Passing fake bills at the mall. Real Father of the Year material." McVeigh stood back, holding Malik at arm's length while the boy struggled and cried. Around them, a crowd had gathered. The click and whir of phone cameras filled the air. Some shoppers muttered in disapproval, though it wasn't clear toward whom. Others simply turned away, suddenly fascinated by shoe displays. "You making a mistake," David managed to say, his cheeks scraping against the floor. "That bill is legitimate. I'm a federal." Yeah, you're somebody important, right?" Harlan laughed, pulling David roughly to his feet. "Heard it all before. Save it for the judge." David's shoulders screamed as Harlan yanked upward on the cuffs. He could see Malik's tear-streaked face in the gathering crowd. The sight of his son's terror and confusion cut deeper than any physical pain. "Please," David said, his voice lower now, meant only for the officers. "My son is scared. Let me at least tell him—" "Should have thought about your kid before you started running scams." McVeigh spoke up for the first time, his tone flat and dismissive. Harlan started pushing David towards the exit, parading him past shocked onlookers and clicking phones. The mall's bright fluorescent lights created a surreal atmosphere, like a nightmare happening in daylight broadlight. Every face they passed seemed to blur together, some sympathetic, others judgmental, most just uncomfortable. "Dad!"
Daddy! Malik broke free from McVeigh's grip and ran after them. Where are you taking him? Please don't take my dad. David tried to turn around to offer some comfort, but Holland shoved him forward. Eyes front, tough guy. Keep walking. It's okay, Malik. David called over his shoulder, fighting to keep his voice steady. Stay calm, son. Everything's gonna be... Didn't I tell you to shut up? Holland gave the cuffs another twist, making David wince. They pushed through the mall's main doors into the bright morning sunlight. A police car sat waiting, its lights flashing silently. Behind them, Malik's desperate cries continued to echo off the mall's glass facade. Shoppers clustered around, phones raised high to capture every moment. As the cruiser pulled away, David caught a final glimpse of his son's devastated face. The image burned itself into his memory, his boy, alone and frightened, watching his father be